They're mysterious, calculated, and completely misunderstood. If you've ever encountered someone who seems to operate on a different wavelength entirely, someone who processes the world through a lens that feels almost alien to most people, you might have just met an INTJ. But here's the thing that's going to blow your mind. Almost everything you think you know about them is probably wrong. See, INTJ have become the internet's favorite personality type to mythologize. They've been turned into cold masterminds, emotionless chess players, and antisocial geniuses plotting in their underground lairs. But the reality? It's way more complex, and honestly way more interesting than any of these stereotypes suggest. I'm about to shatter 5 massive misconceptions that even psychology enthusiasts get wrong about INTJ. And by the end of this breakdown, you're going to understand why these people aren't the villains or robots they're made out to be. Instead, you'll see them for what they really are. Complex humans with a unique way of navigating reality that's both fascinating and deeply misunderstood. But before we dive into the misconceptions, let me give you some context about why this matters. INTJ make up roughly 2% of the population. That's 1 in 50 people. Yet they're responsible for some of the most groundbreaking innovations, strategic breakthroughs, and systematic changes in history. The problem is, their rarity has made them easy targets for projection and fantasy. People love creating legends around what they don't understand. And when you combine rarity with a personality that naturally keeps its cards close to the chest, you get a breeding ground for myths that spread faster than facts. These myths don't just hurt INTJ by boxing them into limiting stereotypes. They also rob the rest of us of understanding some truly remarkable human beings who could be incredible allies, partners, and collaborators if we just knew how to connect with them properly. So let's start dismantling these misconceptions one by one. Misconception number 1. INTJ are emotionless robots who don't feel anything. This might be the most damaging myth of all because it's so fundamentally wrong it's almost insulting. The idea that INTJs are walking computers without feelings is like saying the ocean is shallow because you can't see the bottom from the surface. Here's what's actually happening. INTJ feel everything. They feel it intensely, they feel it deeply, and they process it constantly. The difference is they don't broadcast their emotional state like a neon sign. They internalize first, analyze second, and express third. This process can take time, sometimes days or even weeks, depending on the complexity of what they're processing. Think about it this way. Most people experience an emotion and immediately react. Happy, they smile. Angry, they snap. Sad, they cry. INTJ experience the same emotion, but run it through an internal filtering system first. They ask themselves questions like, is this emotion logical? What caused it? How should I respond? Is this the right time and place to express it? What are the potential consequences of different responses? This isn't coldness, it's emotional sophistication. They're not suppressing feelings. They're processing them with the same systematic approach they apply to everything else in their lives. The problem is, the world interprets this pause between feeling and expression as a lack of feeling altogether. I've known INTJ who've been moved to tears by a piece of music, who've stayed up all night worrying about a friend's problems, who've made major life decisions based entirely on protecting someone they love. But you'd never know it from their exterior because they believe emotions are private data that should be shared selectively and purposefully. Misconception number 2. INTJ are antisocial loners who hate people. This one drives me crazy because it misses the entire point of how INTJ actually operate socially. They're not antisocial, they're selectively social. There's a massive difference. Antisocial suggests a disregard for social norms and other people's well-being. INTJ are actually hyper-aware of social dynamics. They notice everything. Who's uncomfortable, who's dominating the conversation, who's being fake, who's genuine. They see the social matrix in real time, and often that awareness is exactly why they choose to step back from it. The truth is, INTJ don't hate people. They hate superficiality. They hate small talk that goes nowhere. They hate social games and unspoken rules that seem designed to waste everyone's time. They hate networking events where people exchange business cards without any real connection. They hate being in groups where the conversation never goes deeper than weather, sports, or gossip. But put an INTJ in a room with someone who wants to discuss ideas, who's curious about the world, who's willing to explore complex topics without getting offended, and watch what happens. They transform. They become animated, engaged, and genuinely excited to connect. They just need the connection to have substance. Many INTJ have a small circle of incredibly close relationships, rather than a large network of acquaintances. They invest deeply in the people they choose to let in. They're the friend who remembers what you said 3 months ago about your career concerns and follows up to see how you're handling it. They're the partner who notices you're stressed before you even realize it yourself and quietly handles things to make your life easier. The selectivity isn't about hating people. It's about recognizing that their social energy is finite and choosing to spend it on connections that matter. They'd rather have 3 deep friendships than 30 shallow ones. Misconception number 3. INTJ think they're superior to everyone else and look down on people. This misconception probably exists because INTJ have high standards, and they're not afraid to voice when something doesn't meet those standards. But having high standards and thinking you're better than everyone else are completely different things. Here's what's really going on. INTJ hold themselves to incredibly high standards first and foremost. They're their own harshest critics. They see their own flaws with painful clarity and are constantly working to improve themselves. When they apply those same standards to external situations, it's not because they think they're superior. It's because they believe everything can be optimized and improved. An INTJ who criticizes a system at work isn't trying to show off their intelligence. They genuinely see inefficiencies that are bothering them and want to fix them. An INTJ who seems unimpressed by popular trends isn't being pretentious. They're just not easily influenced by what everyone else is doing. They form their opinions independently and stick to them until given compelling reasons to change. The confusion comes from their communication style. INTJ tend to be direct and matter-of-fact. They'll point out problems without sugarcoating them. They'll disagree with popular opinions without worrying about social consequences. To people who are used to more diplomatic or people-pleasing communication styles, this directness can feel like arrogance or condescension. But here's the key insight. When INTJ encounter someone who genuinely knows more than they do about a subject, they don't get defensive or competitive. They get curious. They ask questions. They want to learn. They respect expertise wherever they find it. True arrogance can't do that. Arrogance needs to protect its ego. INTJ are more interested in being accurate than being right. The perceived superiority complex is often just confidence in their own analytical abilities, combined with frustration when they see preventable problems being ignored or inefficient systems being defended, simply because that's how things have always been done. Misconception number 4. INTJ are natural-born leaders who want to control everything and everyone. This one is particularly interesting because it gets something half right and half wrong. INTJ can be exceptional leaders, but not for the reasons people think. and definitely not because they're control freaks who enjoy bossing people around. Most INTJ actually prefer to work independently. They like having autonomy over their projects and methods. They don't seek leadership positions for power or status. They end up in leadership roles because they see systems that need fixing and no one else is stepping up to fix them. When an INTJ becomes a leader, they're not trying to micromanage every detail of everyone's lives. They're trying to create efficient systems that allow people to do their best work. They delegate extensively. They trust competent people to handle their areas of expertise. And they focus on the big picture strategic elements that will make the whole operation more effective. The control freak stereotype comes from their perfectionist tendencies and their low tolerance for incompetence. But there's a crucial distinction here. INTJ don't want to control people. They want to control outcomes. If you can deliver results using your own methods, they'll leave you completely alone. It's only when results aren't happening that they step in with more direct guidance. Think of an INTJ leader like an architect. They design the blueprint. They make sure the foundation is solid. They check that everything is structurally sound. But they're not standing over every construction worker telling them exactly how to hammer each nail. They care about the integrity of the final building, not about controlling every tiny detail of the construction process. Many INTJ actually struggle with traditional leadership because they prefer leading through competence and vision rather than charisma and politics. They want people to follow their ideas because the ideas are good, not because they're skilled at manipulation or inspiration. This can make them seem aloof or disconnected as leaders, but it also means when people do follow them, it's usually because they genuinely believe in the direction, not because they've been charmed or coerced. Misconception number 5. INTJ are pessimistic cynics who always expect the worst from people and situations. This final misconception might be the most ironic because it completely misses one of the most fundamental aspects of the INTJ personality. They're actually incredible optimists, just not in the way most people recognize. The confusion happens because INTJ are realistic about present circumstances while being deeply optimistic about future possibilities. They see current problems clearly. They acknowledge obstacles honestly, and they plan for potential failures. To people who prefer positive thinking and focusing on the bright side, this can look like pessimism or negativity. But here's what's actually driving that behavior. INTJ believe deeply that almost everything can be improved. They see inefficiencies, problems, and limitations not as permanent fixtures, but as puzzles to be solved. Their criticism of current systems comes from their vision of how much better things could be. An INTJ looking at a struggling business doesn't see a hopeless situation. They see unrealized potential. They start identifying the root causes of the problems, developing strategies to address them, and creating long-term plans for transformation. The fact that they focus on what's wrong isn't pessimism. It's the first step in their optimization process. They're also surprisingly hopeful about human nature. Yes, they're realistic about people's flaws and limitations. Yes, they plan for the possibility that people might let them down. But they also believe that most people are capable of growth and improvement when given the right systems, incentives, and opportunities. The cynical reputation comes from their low tolerance for willful ignorance and their frustration with people who seem to prefer complaining about problems rather than working to solve them. But cynicism suggests giving up on the possibility of positive change. INTJ never give up on that possibility. They just want to approach change systematically rather than hoping it will happen by accident. They're the people who see a broken educational system and spend years developing alternative approaches. They're the ones who notice environmental problems and dedicate their careers to creating sustainable solutions. They're the individuals who identify social injustices and work quietly behind the scenes to build better frameworks for addressing them. This is optimism in action. Even if it doesn't look like the cheerful, everything will work out fine variety that most people are used to. It's optimism backed by strategic thinking and systematic effort. Now here's the thing that ties all these misconceptions together. They all stem from the same fundamental misunderstanding about how INTJ process and interact with the world. People expect emotional expressions to be immediate and obvious. People expect social engagement to be broad and frequent. People expect communication to be diplomatic and reassuring. People expect leadership to be charismatic and inspiring. People expect optimism to be cheerful and uncritical. INTJ operate differently on every single one of these dimensions, and instead of trying to understand the difference, most people just assume something is wrong or missing. They project their own values and preferences onto INTJ behavior and come away with completely incorrect conclusions. But when you understand what's actually happening beneath the surface, when you recognize the depth of feeling behind the calm exterior, when you see the selectivity in social connections as quality over quantity, when you realize the high standards come from genuine care about excellence, when you understand the leadership style is about empowerment rather than control, when you recognize the criticism comes from a vision of better possibilities, suddenly INTJ become much more approachable and much more valuable as allies. The problem is, these misconceptions create a vicious cycle that makes it even harder for INTJ to connect authentically with others. When someone approaches an INTJ expecting them to be cold, manipulative, or arrogant, the INTJ picks up on those expectations immediately. And what do? They often retreat further, which confirms the other person's biases and reinforces the stereotypes. It's like being trapped in a funhouse mirror, where your reflection gets more and more distorted the longer people stare at it. The real person gets lost behind layers of projection and assumption. And the tragedy is that both sides miss out on what could be incredibly meaningful connections. Think about how this plays out in professional settings. An INTJ joins a team and immediately starts analyzing workflows, identifying bottlenecks, and suggesting improvements. But instead of seeing this as valuable input, colleagues assume they're being arrogant or trying to show everyone up. So they start excluding the INTJ from informal discussions and decision-making processes. The INTJ notices this exclusion, realizes their input isn't wanted, and pulls back even further. They stop offering suggestions. They keep their observations to themselves, and they focus solely on their individual responsibilities. The team loses access to insights that could have dramatically improved their performance, and the INTJ becomes even more isolated and misunderstood. Or consider romantic relationships. An INTJ shows love by anticipating their partner's needs, solving problems before they become major issues, and creating stable systems that make daily life smoother. But if their partner expects love to look like constant verbal affirmations and spontaneous emotional displays, they might interpret these practical expressions of care as emotional distance or lack of passion. So here's the bottom line. INTJ aren't the cold masterminds or antisocial geniuses the internet has made them out to be. They're complex, deeply feeling humans who just happen to process the world through a different operating system than most people. Once you understand what's really driving their behavior, these supposed mysteries become perfectly logical. The quiet exterior hides emotional depth. The selectivity reveals quality over quantity. The high standards reflect genuine care for excellence. The strategic thinking comes from optimistic problem-solving. Stop projecting your expectations onto their unique way of being and start appreciating the incredible allies they can become. Because when you finally see past the misconceptions, you might just discover some of the most loyal, insightful, and transformative people you'll ever meet. Like, share, and subscribe if you felt this. And if you're an INTJ, drop a red heart in the comments to let the rest of us know you're watching.